Hey fellas, in this video I wanted to go over something that I felt called to share. I believe this message is for people who are really open to the idea of this, and I think if you're watching my content, if you're watching my channel, you are open to receiving this message, and this is truthfully a weapon inside of your recovery process and your life in general. The main message condensed is kind of in the title, right? It's that God has a plan for you in your life. I want to speak a little bit on what that means, kind of what that looks like maybe in your shoes, in your situation right now, give some of my own insights, and just give you some actionable recommendations just to allow you to actually make changes that are sustainable, that's going to allow you to see permanent freedom and actually feel like you became a different man, a new creation inside of this process, because that is the goal, not just getting clean. Now, looking back in my life, when I was going through this in high school, in college, and I was acting out on a consistent basis, there's something that's obvious to me right now that wasn't obvious to me at the time, in that I was moving through life and I was doing the things that everyone told me to do. I was living life that way. I was valuing the things that everyone else is supposed to value. And what was happening was that I was operating my own life within my own willpower and my own means. And very quickly, I started to see how, man, like, this mode of operating is not successful to actual fulfillment. It's leading me to take paths of, instant gratification, wanting to feel good right now, and it was basically dominated by that primal kind of flesh side of me. It was interesting because even despite having very ambitious goals or, valuing things within my own education and career path and actually being driven towards that, it felt like everything was forced. And I felt this deep void in my life where it's like, man, I really don't know if this is my path. I don't really think that this is, but I'm going to keep operating in this way because it's safe, because this is what I should do. And every single day I felt like I was living in, I wasn't living in integrity, and it hurt me to my soul. It hurt me to my core. And what was happening was, not only did I feel that, but I was also having to rely on my own strength and willpower and might to move through life very forcefully. That within itself was very taxing. If you take that into account, take into account that I was very unfulfilled in the things that I was doing in my life, my whole life design, I was seeking escapes and needing escapes. And looking back now, the piece of insight that I have was that whole moment in my life was a very spiritual battle. I was in this process where the flesh was dominating my spirit, and that was the way that I was operating in life. One of the big things that allowed me to not only get clean but become a new creation was to tap back into God and actually have a personal relationship. I had a very personal relationship growing up with God. I grew up in a Christian household, and that certainly helped, but as I started to operate within my own means, that quickly started to deteriorate over the months and years of me living in the flesh. A huge thing that happens in every single recovery story is that the man becomes a new creation. That is a spiritual thing at its core, where you stop living through the means of your flesh and start to live through a different operating system, one with integrity, one with a spiritual wisdom and insight, closeness to God, and one with actual morals that allows you to have a sense of fulfillment in your life. Going through this change, becoming a different man, a different creation, and having this new identity is a non-negotiable for actual long-term freedom. Recovery is not just trying to get clean and stay clean. That is a gross underestimation about what it actually looks like. You become a different man. You become the man you've always been able to become, but for one reason or another feel like you're so far away from that. That is the recovery process, and it's spiritual in nature. And looking back, when I was going through all of this, I was just going through my own will in pathway in life, and it wasn't leading to good results. And it took a very honest, multiple conversations after setback and relapse after relapse, where I decided to say, all right, God, I've messed things up, and I honestly believe that I messed things up beyond repair. Guide me in this process, give me wisdom, give me clarity about what to do, and help me make these changes and give me strength. And over time, I started to get a lot of spiritual insights about how to operate in my life. And I feared it. I feared that change because I was letting go of the old perspective of life. I was in a state of cognitive dissonance. I was in one state where it was comfortable. It might not be the best life design, but I knew it very well. And I was moving into a different chapter and becoming a different man that was uncomfortable, that required me to kill my flesh and start to operate in that different operating system. And it took some time for me to really start to trust God's will in my life. But the thing was, when I started to operate within what God wanted me to do, which for me was dropping out of school and, trying to find something else for me to do, which I kind of at the time knew would be YouTube, but I just didn't really know what that would look like. And a bunch of other changes as well. I started to realize that even though I wasn't getting the results yet, I felt this sense of fulfillment. I was like, man, I know I'm moving in the right direction. I was so numb every single day. After relapse, the shame and the guilt, I couldn't feel that anymore. I knew how to process that, and I was just numb 24/7. But the second that I started to be aligned with what God had in my life, joy started to arrive. Just faith was strong. I felt good about the direction I was going in. I felt fulfillment, and I wasn't even getting the results yet. So I knew I was going in the right direction, and the best thing was, over weeks and months of these changes to happen all throughout my life, I realized that I didn't have to rely on my own willpower anymore. I didn't have to rely on my own strength to grind and force my way through life. Things came naturally because this was what it was supposed to be. And my message for you today, before I give you some extremely actionable advice, is that God has a better path and purpose for your life. And it requires you to make some drastic changes, to kill off the flesh and to start to act in a more spiritual sense and to have a personal relationship with God. If you can do those things, you're not going to be perfect, but if you can start to slowly accept those changes, you're going to see big differences in the man who you are right now and who you will become in the future. You might have false beliefs that if you make these changes, you're going to make less money, you're going to be less fulfilled, you're not going to, have this or that. But those fleshly desires are not true. You actually have a more fulfilling life when you make these changes. It just feels like you're going to be at loss because you have to sacrifice the flesh. But there's something more out there for you. This is not it. God has a plan for your life, and He wants you to have a personal relationship with Him. And I'm going to give you some steps on how to actually do that. Now, what I want you guys to do to become that new creation and feel so much better is to go on a 48-hour water fast. You can drink some black coffee, you can drink some tea, but nothing added to any of that. The more water you drink, the better. What I want you to do in that time frame is allow yourself to think more about life, journal, pray, talk to God, just get tapped into the source. And the thing you're going to notice, outside of all the health benefits of fasting, outside of, all the recovery benefits of fasting in terms of feeling a temptation, not making a big deal out of it, and just kind of sitting with that desire and just watching it kind of wash away a little bit. There's some great things to that, but the main thing you're going to get out of this fast is to be spiritually tapped in again. And you're going to feel changes. You're going to feel different. And this is probably going to be a major revelation in your life to be like, whoa, there's something more here, that I can really tap into. Or it's going to strengthen the relationship with God that you already have. And during this time, He's going to show you things. He may rebuke you a little bit. Hey, make these changes, right? I've been waiting for you to do that. Or He's going to speak to you somehow. And that's not necessarily going to be an audible voice in your head or kind of a gentle whisper. You're going to have this intuition, this very wise intuition about what to do in your life, what changes to make, and that is from God. You're going to have that relationship, and you can strengthen that even more through prayer. You can strengthen that just, again, like I said, talking to God, just have a conversation. That right there, if you can get tapped into that, that's going to be a huge thing for you. And I guarantee that once you see that in your life, you're not going to want to go back. And another reason I'm recommending this, because outside of just the spiritual benefits, you're starting to become a different person by no longer operating in that primal state with your fleshly desires dictating how you think and how you act in the moment, and becoming a more balanced and centered person at your core that's not dictated by these fleshly desires, so you can walk more in the spirit. I've done fasts multiple times in my life, and each time I've done them, I've always come away with just amazing insights, just fantastic insights. I actually have a book recommendation for you guys if you want to do this as you're going through the fasting process. It's something that I used to do and still do to this day, because it is difficult, especially if you're doing an extended fast, anything past 48 hours. And the book is called Fasting by Jensen Franklin. Very good book. And that gave me a lot of wisdom about, what God thinks of fasting, the spiritual benefits to it. And it goes really deep, man. And that was something that gave me motivation during fasts, very extended fasts. And it just kept me, locked in. And it allowed me to see all the changes that were happening in the moment as I was going on that fast. So great book. Definitely recommend doing that. Again, just pray during the fast. Talk to God during the fast. Journal if you need to. Listen to those insights. That will be a good thing for you. Last thing that I want to leave you with. This is a very spiritual battle. Once you see this, and once you acknowledge that this recovery process is a very spiritual battle, one between the flesh and one between the spirit, that's when you can start to operate in a different light, because you're seeing the realities of it. You can get clean. You can make changes without seeing this. But if you see this, and you know this to be true, it gives you a big advantage. It makes everything so much easier, so much faster, and it allows you to become a better man, right? You're not going through your own willpower anymore. Here's the best thing about this, man. Instead of grinding day to day, using willpower, using discipline to try to stay clean, you just become the man that you needed to be, that you don't even need to go and act out anymore. You don't get urges. And if you do, if anything pops up from like a visual trigger, it's just like, man, why would I do that? Like you don't even have to expend energy to stay in that state anymore, because you became a different person. You think differently, you act differently, and your identity is different. And that's something that I want everybody to see in their own lives, because it changed me completely forever. So with that said, guys, I hope this was helpful for you guys. If you feel called to do it, go on that fast. And with that said, I'll see you guys in the next one.